In the spring of 1981, the resort town of Keddie, California, was defined by its distance from the outside world. Tucked into the dense pine forests of the Sierra Nevada, it offered a silence that was supposed to be a sanctuary. 36-year-old Glenna Sue Sharp was renting Cabin 28. She had moved her 5 children here to start a fresh life, away from the complications of the city. The night of April 11 began like any other. Sue was at home with her 12-year-old daughter Tina, her 15-year-old son John, and John's friend Dana, who was staying the night. The next morning, Sue's 14-year-old daughter Sheila returned from a sleepover at a neighbor's house. When she opened the front door, she discovered her mother, her brother, and his friend had been murdered in the living room. The very isolation that drew the Sharps to Keddie ultimately ensured that a violent struggle inside this small cabin went entirely unnoticed by the rest of the town. The scene in the living room was one of extreme violence. The victims had been bound with electrical cords and medical tape, their bodies showing signs of a prolonged and brutal struggle. The attackers used hammers and knives with such force that one steak knife used in the assault was found bent at a 90-degree angle. Beyond the violence in the living room, investigators found a series of details that seemed to defy physical logic. 2 specific discoveries at the crime scene upended the investigation, suggesting that what happened in Cabin 28 was far more calculated than a random act of violence. Cabin 28 was a small, rustic structure. Its interior walls were thin, uninsulated pine, providing almost no acoustic barrier. Just feet away from the murders, police found Sue's 2 youngest sons and their friend in the back bedroom. They were completely unharmed and still asleep. Despite a multi-hour struggle involving hammer strikes and shouting, the boys told investigators they had slept through the entire night without hearing a sound. Some investigators theorized the boys were directly threatened into silence. Others suggested that the sheer intensity of the event may have caused a traumatic psychological block. But the physical reality of the cabin remains a hurdle. Sound carries easily through these structures, making the total silence reported by the survivors a central contradiction of the case. This silent room leaves only 2 possibilities. Either the perpetrators exerted an impossible level of control over the noise they made, or the children's survival came at the cost of what they were forced to ignore. While 3 children were left behind, 1 was missing. 12-year-old Tina Sharp had vanished from the cabin entirely. There were no signs of a struggle in the bedroom she shared with the other children. The only evidence left behind was a single, small blood stain on her bed. Her disappearance raises questions about the killer's intent. She may have been an eyewitness who had to be removed, or she might have been the primary objective of the entry from the beginning. Abducting a single victim while leaving others behind suggests a specific selection. It indicates a perpetrator willing to accept the extra time and risk required to carry out a targeted plan. For 3 years, Tina's whereabouts remained unknown. Then, in April 1984, a bottle hunter found a portion of a human skull in a remote forest 29 miles away from Keddie. Forensic testing confirmed the remains belonged to Tina Sharp. Shortly after the discovery, an anonymous caller reached out to the sheriff's office. They confirmed the exact location of the skull before that information had been released to the public. The call suggests that someone involved was still paying attention. They were monitoring the investigation from a distance, aware of the discovery before the public even knew the remains had been identified. Suspicion eventually landed on the neighbors in Cabin 26, Martin Smart and his friend John Bubeidi. When Martin's wife, Marilyn, left him shortly after the murders, she told police she had discovered a blood-stained hammer in his toolbox. Martin also sent a letter to Marilyn that contained a direct admission. He wrote, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." Despite the confession and the physical evidence of the hammer, local law enforcement failed to interrogate the suspects or secure the evidence at the time. The case of Cabin 28 remains open, not for a lack of evidence or suspects, but because the opportunity to act on those leads was allowed to slip away.